Like this? My goodness. That is true.
No, but it's not comfortable.
No, it's not.
Bom, então nós vamos começar a segunda aula do Minicurso sobre Filosofia Intercultural. We are starting the second class on Intercultural Philosophy, the second seminar. Once again, thank you very much for being with us here, Professor. And, well, I believe Lincoln has told me that you had something to say about Nyaya and Jainism today, so if you would like to start with that.
Yes, thank you so much. Since Lucas and the whole organization have given me the freedom to choose my topic myself. So tomorrow I'll be doing interculturally oriented historiography of philosophy. But today I want to do two things. Because we are, you just being a linguist and all that, so two things I just put to discussion for all of you, and do criticize, because I have my own picture. The first one is translation our fate? Are we doomed to translation? Can't we do without translation? This is one thing. And this is also a part of my biography. For the last 42 years, I'm just understanding Germans and the whole of Europe through translation. On all levels, not only language. So this I'm going to talk nearly, say, 40 minutes, and then we talk. And the second one is, and that is then part of logic, a rough classification of two models of logic. Western logic with its 3 members of syllogism, and the Indian logic with its 5-membered syllogism. Indian classical theory of syllogism has 5 members, and classical Western logic has only 3, just to combine how they come. Indian philosophy is from the very beginning a philosophy rooted in perception. It is not a type of philosophy from above, but it is a philosophy from below. And this will be interesting, I think, for some of you at least. So these two things I'm going to do today.
Just a quick reminder, se alguém quiser fazer perguntas para o professor em português, pode fazer que eu traduzo, não tem problema. I was just saying that if someone wants to ask a question in Portuguese, they can, so I can translate to you.
So one thing, he is just playing with Hegel sometimes, this way and that way. Now I just start quoting one sentence from Paul Ricoeur. In one of his books, he writes, why, this is the question he puts to himself, why is it impossible to be a Hegelian? That is the question he puts to himself. And then he says, and that is his answer, he says, it is impossible to be a Hegelian because for Hegel to understand anything in a different way than he understands is no understanding. And this is the unification. This is the so-called philosophical fundamentalism. That means Hegel doesn't accept any other way of interpreting the world. And if he accepts, then he says, oh, this is just on the way, on the top, and that is the culmination theory of philosophy. It is like Christianity, There are so many religions, but Christianity on the top. And this is what Ricoeur says. Otherwise, it is very good to be Hegelian, but he doesn't allow, if you understand the world, in a different way. And that won't do. Particularly the spirit of intercultural philosophy won't accept it. So, how should I start with logic or should I start with?
Alguém tem alguma preferência? Se começa com a questão de tradução ou a questão da lógica? Lógica.
Yeah, all right.
Logic.
So first let me just the two models so that I can talk about it. In your class, I will get the two. That is particularly Aristotle. And the famous sentence,
Só para perguntar rapidinho também, todo mundo está conseguindo acompanhar no inglês? Está tranquilo? Tá.
Next is Sanskrit word. Before you start from the very beginning, just this, all when a martyr, this is the example which is everywhere, in any logical belief. All men are martyrs, Socrates, Socrates' words.
Would you mind just the
Should I take it?
Yes.
Yes, it's all right.
Yeah.
Yes. You know, these three members, all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, Socrates is mortal, and the Indian syllogism more or less argues with perception as the very basis of it. Now we say, first the thesis is, there is fire on the mountain. That is what we want to prove. Here, all men are mortal, God knows how do we know it. But the Indian logic asks, there is fire on the mountain, but how do you know it? There is fire on the mountain, the second, because there is smoke over there. The Sanskrit word is here, hetu, the reason, the ground, why it is so. So this is the second sentence, because. And then the third one, because there is smoke over there. This is the second one. This is the reasoning, why it is so. And then the third one, that is the perceptual part of it. That is the case-based knowledge. The third one is, last time in the kitchen is smoke with fire. That is what we saw. This is the third one. And the fourth one is, and in this case, it is the same. On the mountain, we see only the smoke, and the fire is inferred. But in the kitchen, we already realized it. In this case, it is the same. And the fifth, this is why we infer fire after perceiving smoke. These five members. Now you can see this one, kitchen, this, as in the kitchen, gives us a perceptual guarantee for the inference. In that case, all men are mortal, no logic, no perceptual explanation is given. How do you know all men are mortal? Because God has made up like this, or it is an experience, or we just take it for granted. And that is one of the reasons that Indian logic never developed a purely formal logic. Because they always thought formal deduction makes little sense for the development of human life, because in the logic, in the Western logic, you can say all men have three legs. He is one of them, he has three legs. You just imagine. Formally, it is 100% valid. Indian logic asks, what for? And that's why all men are mortal. There is no empirical evidence for that. Either you start with this A proposition, or you leave it as if. And that's why there are modern logicians, they say, European logic is a logic if-then. If all men are mortal, and if Socrates is a man, he's mortal. That means formal validity. All Americans are very rich. He is an American, he's rich. So he may be poor, but he's rich. Formally it is valid. And that's why Indian logic says, what should we do with this formal validity? In what way does it help us philosophically, ethically, morally? So these 5 steps, in a way, anyway, I'm going to explain it later on, but this, you keep it in mind, and then we just try. My God, this thing is really...
Is it too loud?
No, it's not so loud. I have to manage it with the movement. And now let me just start this thing. The Western model and the Western model, and I think I keep it in my hand here. Now, in the Aristotle and the Nyaya logic, I mean, these two pages we have on this. Now, the distinctive aspect of the Indian, particularly the Nyaya logic, here is that the 5 members here, and in Aristotle only the 3, the importance given to the citation of an example. That examples verify, that means the examples have a normative impact. Why we combine these two things, that in the citation of an example is smoke fire is very important. In the case of the logic of John Stuart Mill, there are 2 very similar sentences, cases in agreement and cases in disagreement. And that is very similar to this. No? And cases in agreement in the kitchen, smoke and fire. And the Nyaya logic says, but there is no fire, there is no smoke and fire relation in the lake. That is the word they use. In the lake, where there is water, there is cases in disagreement. And cases in agreement and cases in disagreement. Both cases are just taken to support the 5-member syllogism. And here, the 5 members, it is just a methodological way of persuading somebody logically to believe what I say is logically correct. And these 5 steps, as we said here, is the empirical connotation is very important. Because if we make it completely formal, then the whole logic becomes a type of formal validity. And the formal validity would be that it has hardly any relation to the actual life. And that is where Indian logic is also in the service of the aims of life. Yeah? And that is one of the reasons why this logic is more or less case-based logic. And in this pattern, we can see here Indian logic and Western logic. Indian logic is on the whole not a class logic. It is not extensional logic. It is intentional logic. That means it emphasizes always the qualities and not the class. Because the class logic is always, the sentences start more or less always with all men are mortal, or this quanta logic. And here you see that 2 examples just I want to give you. One is Quine and David Hume. David Hume says, when we infer anything, how do we do it? And then he asks the question, did Adam, that is his example, did Adam know that fire is hot when he first time saw the fire? You know, that you can see that with the logical thinking must be grounded in experience. And there he says, how could we know it? Maybe it is intuition, or it is some type of transcendentalism, or some type of a priori, some type of ontology. But that is not the case. That's why one must at least experience. So the kitchen and the fire here. So Adam must have experienced that fire is hot. And then he concluded it all the time. And then there's a very interesting question put by Quine, these mathematicians. He says he was very critical of Indian logic, Quine, in the beginning. And Matilal worked with him for a very long time in the States. And he somehow convinced him that Indian logic is quite powerful. And then there is a very good example given by Quine. He says, suppose we Europeans want to define the term, the concept, a mathematician cyclist, you know, a mathematician cyclist, a mathematician who is cycling. You know, how to do it? He says, for a mathematician, thinking is essential and not the healthy legs. And for the cyclist, healthy legs are important than thinking or reason. But Indian logic would say intentional, that means the quality. Which quality is more important? And then we define. But the term mathematician cyclist, if you want to define in one sentence, it will be very, very difficult, because we are going to neglect either the healthy legs or the reason part of it. And that's why the intentional logic is nearer to the qualities which are important than the explanation. And that is where he says Western logic, so to say class logic, won't be able to define mathematician cyclists in one. But Indian logic can do it, just asking which quality is more important in the context in which I'm going to define that term, mathematician cyclist. I think here I stop, and then we can talk, and then later.
Well, could everyone follow? Does anyone want me to make a short resume? Yeah? Okay? Bom, Yeah. So, então, a explicação muito geral do que ele disse, né, é que justamente nessa comparação entre a lógica ocidental e a lógica indiana, né, é que justamente enquanto a lógica ocidental, o silogismo tem apenas 3 termos e não se apoia de nenhuma maneira na experiência, né? Você fala todos os homens são mortais, mas você tirou isso da onde, né? Não é relevante para esse caso. Tudo bem que no caso de todos os homens mortais a gente pode até dizer que tem algum apoio, mas se falasse todos os homens têm 3 pernas, daria na mesma, assim, não é isso que é a questão. Então, enquanto essa lógica não se baseia de nenhuma maneira na experiência, né, ela é pura e simplesmente formal, ela se baseia, ela examina apenas o aspecto formal daquilo que está sendo dito. A lógica indiana ela tem sempre um apoio na experiência, tanto que o primeiro termo do silogismo, como está ali, né, na louça, é há fogo na montanha. E aí que é a tese, né, o paksha. E aí depois vem a causa, a justificativa, a razão, né? Ele fala porque a fumaça, porque eu estou vendo fumaça ali na montanha. Em seguida, você precisa do... Qual que é o termo em inglês? Oi? Ah, sim. E aí você precisa dar um exemplo para mostrar que tem essa relação entre causa e efeito, né? Então eu vi na cozinha que o fogo e a fumaça estavam juntos. Aí, logo em seguida, você mostra no quarto termo, na aplicação desse exemplo, você mostra, olha, mas é a mesma coisa, assim como ali na cozinha tinha fogo e fumaça, aqui também vai ter fogo e fumaça. Logo tem montanha, a conclusão, logo tem fogo na montanha. E isso mostraria justamente que, no caso da lógica indiana, a lógica indiana tem sempre essa preocupação com a vida, né, com a experiência, com algo que possa ser aplicado concretamente, e não que se baseie apenas num exame abstrato de determinados conceitos, independentemente de como isso poderia ser aplicado. E isso serviu também para ele dizer que, enquanto a lógica ocidental é extensional, né, diz mais respeito justamente a analisar o domínio de objetos a que um determinado conceito se aplica, a lógica indiana seria intencional, né? Ela está focando mais na qualidade e compreender essas qualidades dos objetos do que definir a extensão a que eles se aplicam, justamente por essa ênfase na experiência. Mas acho que a ideia geral era essa. So, thank you.
That's a good that you explained it. I mean, one sentence, just I want to, the moment logic takes the form of if, then there is hardly any possibility to deconstruct such a logic. There is a very good example given by the famous logician Bochensky, former logician, and this is one of the very rare books that is in German, maybe the translation is there, formal logic, that there is one big chapter on Indian logic, and there he says India is the only country where besides the European concept of logic, there is an independent culture of logic. And there he says that the Indian logic tends to some form of if-then. The universality is a part of if-then. And then he gives a very peculiar type of example that quite interesting. He says, if snow is black, donkeys can sing. If the color of snow is black, donkeys can sing. You can never falsify it, really, and that is really what happens in if-then logic. And that is the formal character. It is the content is not taken into account at all. And that is where he says that Indian logic always kept some relation with the real structures. And that's why this drishtanta, that means this example. So this is more or less the normative element in Indian syllogism. And that's why it is a perceptual element. And if you see the whole system of European logic, then it is either too metaphysical, too idealistic, or even theological, or completely formalized. But all these, nobody would even, if you ask Hegel, of course, you won't give any empirical example, because the whole thing starts from above. So experience has to follow the rules and regulation of a priori structures. That is what Kant would say. Hume or all empiricists, they turn the table. No, it is from experience that we learn anything. And that is more or less in all histories of philosophy, particularly in India, it is the primacy of perception which is more important. And this perception can go even to intuition. Atman, Brahman, identity is not some type of ideological or idealistic or purely rationalistic identity. That means Atman, Brahman identity is a piece of experience, anubhav. It is a piece of experience. And so also nirvana and all that it is the experience which describes or defines the term, and not the metaphysical or ontological. And that's why you just read the book History of Western Philosophy. Bertrand Russell says Hegel's. Why are we after Hegel?
Everyone is after Hegel.
That's okay. Hegel's absolute mind, absolute spirit, and that is his word, is a myth. It's a myth. It falls from above, from heaven. God knows why. And that, once you accept this system, things are all right. But the trouble is, how should I do it? I'm not a metaphysical believer. I'm also not a Christian, and this and that. And that's why one can't completely neglect the role of experience played even in this discipline of logic. And that is one of the reasons that Buddhism traveled via China, Korea, up to Japan, and that is more or less a bit sad. But of course, in another sense, it's the logical, the purely logical part of Buddhism got lost, because the Chinese interest was more or less more practical than metaphysical. So metaphysical part became very poor in China. And of course in Japan, they developed a fantastic, take the case of Zen Buddhism. But that is, there, the written things are not so important. And that is not the case in the field of Indian Buddhism. Because Indian Buddhists had always trouble with the Hindus. Because of Hindu logicians, Hindu metaphysics, because they had always to fight. So they had to develop a logical system to fight with the Nyayas, or with the Jainas, or all other system. And this wasn't the case in China, Korea, or Japan. And this is a richness within Indian philosophy. That's why Indian Buddhism is very metaphysical at a certain point. It is very speculative. Ultimately, of course, it is a realization, nirvana. But it is very critical. Only Nagarjuna, he starts logic where he says, 4 times I say no. But if you ask him, but when are you going to say yes? Then he says, no, the moment you say something, I'll criticize it. And the meaning is really, the truth is beyond expression. The truth is not to be talked about in any piece of language. So this is just a logic which really shows the nature of language, or the limits of language. And sometimes I like Nagarjuna, not from A to Z, but sometimes I really feel that the only way to say is, I can't say anything. But the moment you say something, I have a lot of things to criticize it. And this is not a type of escapism, not that I want to get rid of it. Only it is very, very difficult to say something in a positive terminology. Because the moment you say it, there are always counter arguments. And that is where Nagarjuna persists. That it is ultimately, it is, because it is, in a way, Nagarjuna is a deconstructivist more than Derrida. That means he denies that ideas have any possibility to capture the nature of reality. So this is deconstruction perfect. It is not only deconstruct in the sense of a tradition.
Posso outra resumo ou explico assim? So
They ask something, so that I learn something. I mean, this is not a Vorlesung, as the Germans say, not a frontal. Because this is how I try sometimes, because you are young, you can get your nirvana later on. But in my case, I have to hurry up, And not that I want to, but I personally, I told you in the last book, you had a copy of it, I'm an active pessimist. Because, it makes no sense. The heaven and earth, we are waiting for that for the last so many years, or say Marxism and whatnot. But I never stop doing. And that I have learned from Confucius. That his pupils once said that this is our teacher, and he says it makes no sense. It makes no sense, but still he doesn't stop working. And in a way, in spite of the fact that things may not work, what should I do then? All the time tried, so if I don't get 100%, so I get 1%. So that is very Buddhist. Try to reduce pain, and that is pleasure. Don't search pleasure from the very beginning. Reduction of pain is the addition of pleasure. And this is the negative way of reaching nirvana. Now, nirvana is nothing else but pain reduced to zero. Then you have it. You don't talk about it. But you are going to talk about it till it becomes some type of zero. And this is, for me personally, it has helped a lot, particularly in Germany, where I had a lot of trouble. But anyway, we have trouble everywhere. But they are in a different sense.
But especially in Germany.
Yes. And that was too personal, but it was very sincere. And I'm not dependent, I'm not begging for a doctorate and something like this, so that I can tell these things. Of course, they have been also published somewhere. And this is the trouble, you just imagine great philosophers like Gadamer, such a great philosopher and or hermeneutic philosopher, and he has nearly not read anything about Indian philosophy, not only in Sanskrit or even in translation. But still he says, Indians have wisdom and we have philosophy. This is nonsense. But what to do? And this is happening nearly everywhere. Matila, one of the best Sanskritists and philosopher, his lectures, you just imagine, his lectures on Indian logic, Buddhist logic, were not taken into the syllabus of philosophy department, only in the Department of Asian Studies. Many years he taught there. So the last 2 or 3 years, his lectures on Indian and Buddhist logic were taken into, into that part where philosophy was taught. And this is really in a way very sad. And the trouble is, majority of the philosophers, we hardly know anything about Indian philosophy or Chinese. They say philosophy is only European. Those who have read something of it, even in translation, they of course know something is there. And this that we talk day after tomorrow or tomorrow sometimes, and this is really is still the case. We were talking about, in no German universities, Indian philosophy is taught as philosophy. In hardly in any American USA universities. No, there is Indian philosophy, qua philosophy, as European philosophy. Is nowhere in the Department of Philosophy. And this is really sad. This is sad in the sense that we are not fulfilling our duty, we are teachers, not fulfilling our duty to inform the students that there are other ways of thinking. So of course philosophy has no one mother tongue, but different mother tongues. But don't reduce it to Greek or German, Heidegger. And this is the saddest part of it. And so many students, when they see my face, even in Germany in the philosophy department, oh Mr. Mal, we are going to do Indian philosophy. I said, come on. I have nothing to do with Indian philosophy here. My professorship is for European philosophy. But of course I can do Indian philosophy. And this is the saddest part of it, that the ministers, the organization, and even those powerful professors in the seminars in the university, they are not interested at all. Either they say, then we have to study Indian logic or Indian philosophy, and that is too much of a job, leave it. So let Indologists do it. And that's why I told you, then let in German department, let us do Hegel. Or in German, well, let us do Kant. So it seems very, very hard, but that is really the case, and it has become a tradition in Western university. And nearly all non-Western universities all over the world have philosophy department with European philosophy. Everywhere, in Africa, in your country, everywhere. And the other way around, it is not the case. And this is really, it is really in a sense against human rights. But anyway.
So, anyone would like to make a question, make a comment? I'm going to start harassing people and make someone make a question. Well, then I would actually have a question, Professor. You had.
Não, pode perguntar.
Só uma coisa, desculpa, meu inglês ainda estou tentando acompanhar.
Mas pode falar que eu traduzo.
A questão, na verdade, sobre a questão do pessimismo, quando ele fala, eu não consegui entender, acho que na língua. Se você puder.
Okay. I'm just going to explain what you said about the active pessimist. O que ele disse justamente foi no sentido de que ele é um pessimista ativo, né? Ele diz que ele tira isso do Schopenhauer, que é no sentido de que nosso propósito não é tanto obter prazer, mas sim evitar o sofrimento, né? E a gente obtém o prazer, na verdade, por evitar o sofrimento e não por buscar o sofrimento, ou não por buscar o prazer ativamente. E isso seria uma postura até existencial que ele mesmo adotou em relação à vida dele, para lidar com a própria situação dele, porque o nirvana justamente seria isso, né? Seria você chegar ao zero de sofrimento, né? Você chegar ao não sofrimento, e aí o que acontece depois, só Deus sabe, mas que mesmo para chegar aí, ou Atman, ou Brahma, ou tal, ou enfim, intercultural, só o Deus intercultural sabe, né? Mas então seria essa ideia de uma postura de tentar eliminar o sofrimento, que exige sempre essa prática discursiva, de discussão, de saber o que os outros têm para dizer e tentar aprender com isso, do que tentar buscar ativamente algo de positivo. But with that said, if someone would like to be more active,
Vou perguntar em português, porque em inglês eu parece que a filosofia.
he's going to ask in Portuguese and then I'm going to translate this.
Você não estudou Hilme, você tinha uma exploração do conceito de ato, que o Hilme bastante, em relação ao que dá para a gente inferir desse conceito da lógica, não sei. Para fazer uma ponte, talvez.
He asked, since you have studied Hume so much, he would like to know if you would have anything to say regarding the concept of habit and how this could connect to this idea of logic, and if this would have any possible link with this idea of a different type of logic, with an empirical type of logic.
Yes, I think it is in English. I can send you a copy of it. So years back, Kant's categories and Hume's principles of human nature. So I just tried to combine them. Hume's principles of human nature, they are empirically based. And Kant's categories, they are a priori, transcendental. God knows, they fall from, he says it is there from the very beginning. And for Hume, the principles of Hume, you say habit, custom, imagination. These are the principles, and these principles are embedded in human experience. So I personally believe that Kant should be read not transcendently, but not structurally, but functionally. Only the functions of the categories are more important than the structure, because the structure presupposes some types of aphorism, some types of metaphysics, some types of faith or belief. But the moment you functionalize it, then you ask, what is the function of causality? Then of course you can go to Hume also. What is the function of causality? And the trouble is, Hume would say, even the category of causality is a learned effect. That means we never know when we say the causal relation is something which is there from the very beginning. But what does it mean? A priori knowledge has no verification, because you start with the categories, causality and substance and all that, and you just say the experience has to follow them. You would say no, and that is one of the troubles. I mean, when I was doing my habilitation in Germany, and there was a Kant Congress in 74, 75, I think, and there, and I was just doing my job, doing my research work, and there were called for papers for the students, you know that. No? So you are not invited, but you can send a paper. And if it is accepted, then you. And I thought, you try something, you have to try. That is the active pessimism, I said, no, you have to try, I should have given in Germany, but I simply don't know why I didn't do it, because that is more or less Buddhism. That is where I got the help. No, don't give up. Reduce pain. That will be the best thing. And there I sent a paper with the title, in German it is Hat Kant Hume verstanden? Has Kant understood Hume? The question mark. And my answer ultimately was, Kant's way of doing philosophy and Hume's way of doing philosophy are two ways of doing philosophy. And you can't reduce one to the other. And what really happens, that we always try to convince the students, in Germany more, convince the students the problem, Hume, has been already solved by the categories, a priori categories of Kant. And you know that famous sentence of Bertrand Russell in his fat book, he says, all the time we quote, Hume was awakened out of his dogmatic slumber after reading David Hume. No, Kant was awakened from his dogmatic slumber after reading Hume's treatise. You know that in the Critique of Purism, he writes a sentence. He read Hume's criticism of causality. Before that, he was a dogmatic. And all of a sudden, he woke up out of the dogmatic slumber. That is the word he used, dogmatic slumber. And then Bertrand Russell says, Kant was awakened, of course, after reading David Hume, out of his dogmatic slumber. But later on, he went to bed. You just see, and the meaning is, Kant's solution was no solution for you. And that is in Germany, all my students, after Kant, there is no Hume. Problems are solved. And this is not the case. The problem of causality is not solved in one particular system. And not only that, the present day physics, theoretical physics, is nearer to Buddhism, nearer to David Hume than to Kant. Because a priori things are not playing a great role. So to your question, I personally would say that the moment we ask what are the functions of the categories, then you can combine with Hume, habit, custom, imagination, these factors. And some such functions are also played by categories of all categories, Aristotelian. And this would be a better way, a type of empirical grounding of the categories of Kant. And you can just see, William James has said, he called it nativism of Kant. The nativism is, these are native categories. They are within, psychologically you can find it. It is there. Nativism, that is the word he used. Nativism for Kant. And it all depends, I personally feel that there is a sense that ultimately it happens that when all things have been said and done, then all of a sudden we feel, oh, let it be as it is, but I tend towards Kant more than towards you. This really happens. And this type of intuition, this type of, it happens. There is no logic behind it. And ultimately it does happen. That you say, Mr. Mal, all right, everything, I understand that, but you are convinced what Kant says, I am convinced what Hume says. But for this conviction, there is no deductive logic. Because the moment you say, if arguments are correct, then I can convince you. But then, of course, we have never found any argument in philosophy which convinces all of us, till today. So the conviction which results may be something which comes out of our, so to say, philosophical disposition. That means it is the same thing if you read Schopenhauer, we normally say the bottle is half empty or half full. God knows. Physically or mathematically it is half full or half empty. But there are persons, pessimists, when they say it is half empty, they are happier. And those who are optimists, they say it's half full. And I tend towards, half empty. Then I drink little, But it is half full, then you drink too much. This is, something happens. You just see a Schopenhauer, he would always say half empty. Hegel or somebody, they would say half full. Now the trouble is, where is the reason to say that? And that is where it affects you in such a way. It happens. It's some type of intuition. So philosophy is also a matter of temperament. And that is something which I have learned from William James. That you can never get rid of the temperamental part from philosophy. But otherwise, if reason only determines everything, then you could have only one philosophy from the days of Adam and Eve. But we don't have it. So philosophical disposition, philosophical socialization, these things matter. Suppose your first teacher in the university was a Hegelian as a student, then all of a sudden you tend towards. If it is Hume, then you're towards another thing. But philosophical socialization may be changed. Feyerabend a student of Popper, became an enemy of Popper later. Before that, he was a friend of his. So philosophical socialization may be changed, but there is always some form of a philosophical disposition, how we feel the world. And this we can't get rid of 100%. I try to get rid of it, but then I ask, who is making mistake? Plato or Aristotle? Nagarjuna or Shankar? Nobody is making a mistake. They just can't help seeing things in these two different ways. So the difference, we must cultivate the culture of accepting and respecting difference. Only our spectacle is one pair of spectacle, not the only one. So we just think about it, whether there is any way out of this philosophical disposition. This is, as I told you the day before yesterday, I think, that David Hume says, Descartes looks into himself and finds a substance. David Hume looks into himself, finds nothing. What should you do? Should you say Descartes is more intelligent than Hume? Hume would say, come on, leave me. No. You are intelligent, but I am also intelligent. That is what Hume says. And that is what I would say. If you are a Buddhist, I am not a Buddhist. You are a Christian, so leave me alone. That means your religion is your religion, but the only thing I really fight with the students all these years, you just, my way of seeing things is one way of seeing things. But the moment you say, no, my way of seeing is better or the only one. And this is a philosophical fanaticism. Fundamentally, it is philosophical fanaticism. If you say the way I read Goethe is the only way to read Goethe, it is nonsense. It is empirically nonsense. That's the trouble. And transcendentally, and it is not a faith. And this is where, so accept, this I'm going to do Friday. So accept all ways of reading, culture, text, logic, whatever, except the way of reading which accepts no other way of reading except the one. And such theoretical and practical fanaticisms we have to fight. The trouble is in what way. A normal student doing his doctorate under a big, powerful professor, how should he fight with him? So you have to work out some pragmatic methods to fight with him. Of course, I'm not telling, I'm not immoral. What to do? So that is where the trouble with Husserl is. Lebenswelt, life work. He talks about this thing very well. But ultimately he says philosophy is the exact science. No. So on the one hand, they always absolutize one particular way of seeing things. And there are two ways of absolutizing. One way of absolutizing is this approximation. There are so many religions, the religions, the voodoo and this and that, the Hindus and all that, and Christianity is the culmination of religion. Not only Christianity, Vedanta philosophy. They are as fanatic, because Vedanta philosophy on the top, nonsense. It is something like Hegel. So this is one thing that we go on the top is this. That is culmination theory. And the second one is, no, the only religion is the religion which the religion of, say, Christianity, just from heaven, or even Islam. So both ways are just singularizing one particular thing. To singularize, that's all right. But to singularize in combination with universalization, nonsense. That means your way of seeing things is one way of seeing things in the democracy of seeing things. But you just imagine the moment you say, no, Mr. Even in theory you are wrong, what should I do? Then of course, and that is where the postmodern thinkers are far better. In every discourse, more or less, there is some force at work. It may be the force, it may be physical force, it may be intellectual force, or it may be some type, that you have more to say than the student or the person. And that is where Derrida and all that, they fight with Habermas. Habermas idealizes, so conscience. Anyway, that will be too much of a talk. Would you, your question, with regard between Hume and Kant?
Eu vou falar em português porque eu pensando em pensar em filosofia, mas eu gostei da resposta dele, ele fez bem pensar com as coisas. E se não se importar, você fala outras perguntas.
He asked if you would he liked your answer, it made him think about other things, and he asked you if you wouldn't mind if he made other questions.
Yeah, of course not. My God. Well, I mind you asking such a question.
Yes.
Porque teria um caso, uma exceção talvez ao que você falou, seria as pessoas que interditam o debate. Posto isso, será, e a filosofia intercultural, não sei se faz parte disso.
Não.
E a filosofia intercultural é promovendo, não, claro, o dissenso, o consenso, uma compreensão, mas ela se coloca numa posição contrária a quem interdita o debate. Sendo assim, talvez a filosofia cultural não tenha um caráter político, não na leitura, mas na atitude também. Não sei, tem o caso de Platão, por exemplo, filosofia crítica.
His question was, like I said, if you're going to cultivate a culture of debate, the only problem is if someone tries to block the debate, to impede the debate, to say that only their vision is correct, and so there's no reason to debate. But then his question is, if we are talking about intercultural philosophy as promoting this debate, if it isn't the case that it should also be, in some sense, a sort of political attitude. Not only that we do this debate not only regarding texts or regarding thoughts, but also politically, to think about that politically, what it would mean.
The overlap concept.
This is a very sad question. Of course, I try to answer. This is, of course, there is, yes.
I've talked of Plato's Gorgias.
Yes.
I've read this text in Gerafos Curse.
Yes.
I'm freshman.
Yeah, but that's why I say, tomorrow, day after tomorrow perhaps we will do, no, just today we are going to do it. Yeah, what happens when we translate texts? No? You just imagine, in my book on Gadamer and Popper, they have criticized each other, saying, Gadamer says, Popper doesn't understand Plato. And the reason was because Popper says Plato is one of the, what is that? Plato is a dictator, so to say. It is a dictatorship in his philosophy. What is the word is? Three false prophets. The right man is prophet. Three false prophets in philosophy, and that is Plato, Hegel, and Marx. A very fat and critical book, Popper. These three false prophets, these three. And that is where Gadamer is completely angry. He doesn't understand Plato. And Popper again retaliated and said, no, he doesn't understand Plato. And that is my problem. Not later on, just today. What to do when two Greek philosophers, very intelligent two Greek philosophers, understand Plato completely differently. Is it because of language? No. It is because of some other habit, God knows where it comes from. And that is where the trouble is, that there is no one reading of Plato. There is no one Plato. There is no one Kant, there is no one Shankar. There is one Shankar and Kant only as a referent. But the moment you talk about it concretely, we have different hermeneutics of interpreting Kant and Hegel. And this bad ontological habit, but there must be one Kant. No, this is our habit. No? This is a type of, it is a selfishness, philosophical selfishness. No? There must be one Kant for all of us. No, who told you? And if there is one Kant, let us try to find it. But you can't. You should not oppress me, or just force me to accept your Kant. And that's why the hermeneutic pluralism demands it. We all are interpreting Plato, but there are many Platos after the interpretation. Before the interpretation, there is one Plato. But this Plato is uninterpreted. But the moment Plato is interpreted, we have so many. And if I feel sad about it, then it is my trouble. And this is the Buddhist we saw, that is klesha. That means this is a habit which should get rid of. I want one Plato. And this is some type of intellectual yoga is very important here. That means thinking should cultivate us, should help us, because we just want one Plato. So you want one Plato, I want Plato. I would say ditto to you, it's all right. But the trouble would be, your Plato is the Plato and my Plato is the Plato. And there the trouble again starts. So there is a holy script, Holy Bible. But the moment the interpretation starts, then we say no. Luther, but the Pope. And that is, I think, there we should be, we should demand from our thinking some normative, some ethical impetus. Thinking should not be just a type of intellectual gymnastic. Just thinking, very clever way of thinking. Because it is my wish that there is one Plato, A and B, and this Plato is my Plato. And you just said what to do when I have a person who talks like this. Yeah, then you must manage, and that one can go to William James. There one are upaya in Indian philosophy, that is Buddhist upaya. You know Buddha, that is one very good example in one of the very famous books of Buddhism. That is, a Buddha sees that there is a house and there are so many small children and the house is burning, and Buddha is just outside. In the book, one chapter, and Buddha is just outside and he says what to do. If I tell them to come out, that will be very difficult. Then he cries out from outside. He tells a lie, but it is a lie with the purpose of helping the children. And he says, "Oh children, you just come out. Here we have small carts. With that you can just roam about here and there. There are small carts here with the horses." And all of a sudden all the children came out. And it was a lie. But this lie serves the purpose. And this is Buddhist pragmatism. Buddhism is a very pragmatic philosophy, ultimately. Because thinking is a way to something or for something. It is not its own end. There is no need to think if there are no problems. As I told you yesterday, Wittgenstein. If it doesn't itch, if it itches, then I scratch. That's all. Nothing else.
Well, yes, I think I agree with you that fanaticism is in philosophy, well, in any aspect of life, but also in philosophy is a habit we need to get rid of. Still, well, I've had a sensation that there is a fanatic in each of us.
Fanatic was?
There is a fanatic in each of us. is that in each of us there can be the roots of fanaticism. So I would say, well, it's fine. We need to insist. We need to try at least to overcome the habit and insist to promote non-fanatic ways of doing philosophy. But at the same time, I don't know if it's enough because, well, if everyone, or if it is so common, so we can ask, why is it so common? In almost any philosophical tradition, we see examples, and we see examples all around the world today, in any area, but also in philosophy. So it is important, I would say, to understand why. I mean, to approach it in an understanding way. It's not only saying, going out from here and telling all the world, you shouldn't be fanatics, you shouldn't be fanatics, don't be fanatics anymore. But we need to understand how it happens, why it happens, and probably there could be, I would say it's not justified, I would agree it's not justified, so there can be motives, important motives that we need to value that lead to fanaticism. And well, maybe in general, the way I approach it is, well, it is indeed it could be very painful to be in the face of the possibility that my ideas are wrong, if they are ideas that sustain my life. So,
but empirically, that is what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Empirically. I mean, a very interesting question. No, my counter question to you, is it a type of anthropological constant? You say in every of us there is a fanaticism, core of fanaticism. And my humble question is it anthropology? Is it something transcendental? It is something a priori. Is it a type of ontology? And if it is an ontology, this ontology can be gotten rid of. Buddha got rid of, Gandhi did it, Mandela did it. Mandela could have sent all the white people back home. No? He didn't do it. No? That means we can get rid of this fanaticism. So my question is, in my case, believe me, the spirit of intercultural philosophy has helped me personally a lot. There were days when I was doing Hume. I love Hume really much. William James, some of the taste is there. No? And those were the days in India. I taught some 5 years at the University of Calcutta. So sometimes I was very unhappy when people understood Hume in a different way. No? And after this, 25 years after doing this spirit of intercultural orientation, it helped me a lot. If you understand Hume completely differently, then I don't suffer. Those days are gone. It is very biographical, autobiographical. Those days are gone. That means such limits are there, you are right. But I will functionalize it. I will not structuralize it. It is not something which is not changeable, which is not corrigible. Because the moment you say, Mr. Mal, there is something like this, what to do with this? No, there are cases, only such cases as Mandela, Gandhi and Buddha and Christus and whatnot, such cases, and they are our lamps. So our lamps may be smaller, their lamps are bigger. But there is. I accept what you say, but I would ask you not to ontologize it, not to do a piece of metaphysics or some type of anthropology. It is a constant. But there are cases where this has been overcome.
Indeed, I think that is the point precisely, that we can reach to a point where we can not just go outside and say, please, colleagues, do not be fanatics, but be a witness to the possibility of...
Right, yes, right.
Well, personally, I'm very young still.
Yes,
in philosophy.
Be happy, there is a lot of future.
But I think the spirit has helped me too. I do fight with it anyway.
Yeah.
But sometimes I stop and think about things like and in the school I was formed in philosophy in Bogota, I saw something very interesting because I had the sensation that almost anything could be discussed, except that one day students organized a discussion about the interpretations of the transcendental categories of Kant, and that could be discussed. Then they get mad at one another, my professors.
Oh.
And then sometimes I remember that episode and I say, I don't want to be that guy. Sometimes I know that I can be that guy. So I try to change myself, but I also want to be understanding when I approach others. Well, there are fanatics, but in a way they are like me, so I try to approach them in an understanding way, and in that way serve as a witness that, well, another way of doing things is possible.
I see there, the one way which helps me sometimes, it is better to differentiate grades of fanaticism. Grades. And this may be a good help. That is, of course, I must concede that I would be, of course, very happy if everybody understands intercultural spirit, David Hume, or William James, or Buddha, or this logic the way I understand. I'll be happy. But I try to reduce my unhappiness if you don't understand things the way I understand. This is the negative way of moving towards nirvana. This is, but of course we are always happy that when everybody sees things the way, there is this the example will be, and that will be too much, in one of the seminars that was at the University of Munich, the facticity of empirical facticity is such that there are different interpretations. So instead of trying to give a causal or philosophical explanation for the facticity, for the plurality of this facticity, we always try to say, no, but there must be some one model or one point where we all meet. So my move is no more transcendental, no more metaphysical, no more ontological, also not idealistic. Because then I always thought, where do I get this idea? Whether it is the absolute or not. So the best way would be accepting it would be better if. But the trouble is the semantic if the whole world thinks the way I think, I don't know whether it is a good word. But that is a type of, it is just imagination. So in a way, some 2 years back in a discussion with some of my students, and we just said, Mr. Mal, what would be if you were a billionaire? It was just a joke, taking beer and this and that. If you are a millionaire, you won't be happy. You get crazy and all that. And I said, come on, man, you just give me first 1 million and just find out empirically whether I get crazy or not. This is all nonsense. Come on, that is what I told my students. It is really nonsense. No. So many people, when they became too rich, 2 million, 3 million, they got crazy. That is true, that may be true. All right, but how are you going to judge me? I'm going to first give me the money and just watch. This is empirical verification theory. Come on, you apply it. And that is what I believe it, believe me. I won't accept if somebody tells me, Mr. Mal, if you get 2 millions, you will get crazy. No, that is an empirical induction. It is generalization. All Americans are rich. No. You just put me in the position and watch. So you just imagine, logically, all the time we make such mistakes. Deductive logic, that is the trouble. This deduction all of a sudden. All people having millions, they get crazy. Mr. Man is a millionaire, he will get crazy. This is the deductive logic, and that is what I said, no, that won't do. We just show, there may be persons, they don't get crazy, they can spend their money in a different way. So this is how I personally, with the students for the last so many years, in Munich we have such a society, some of my students, and we talk like this. And they just say, because philosophy can be applied in this way.
takes practice.
Right, yes, of course. That's why the book which I have given you one, Indische Philosophie, that is German. Indische Philosophie. What is it?
Thought and ways of life and ways of thought.
Indian philosophy, a way of thought and a way of life. That is the book which I have written. It's quite a fat book. No? And that is what I believe. It's a way of thinking and a way of living, not only way of thinking. And that's why you can see there are philosophers so intelligent, really intelligent. No? And Friday and Thursday in the lecture house they criticize. They are atheists. And Sunday they are sitting in the church. See, one wonders what are they doing. So philosophy, particularly in the analytic tradition, has become a type of intellectual gymnastic. And the moment you ask, but what about the ethical side of your thinking? Then say, no, that is a different thing. Ethics has nothing to do with philosophy. And that is the trouble with the very staunch and very one-sided analytic philosophers. Because thinking has an ethical aspect. Otherwise, it is just a gymnastic. And that won't do. Because who is going to, my thinking must help me. And particularly philosophers should be very, very careful. With a philosophy is normally taken, philosophers just talk. That's why I say philosophers are always, they are just, they are either they are respected or they are say, they leave them. They are not from this world. So the philosophers have only two pictures, one too high, one too low. And I personally feel that thinking has a normative, an ethical component. And that is in many religions also. And many ethical philosophers do the same.
Another question, comment concerning the many interpretations of philosophy. There was a philosophical experience, so to say, in the 50s. A philosopher called Schiller began a series of the publication of a series of books called the Library of Living Philosophers. So he took, for instance, Popper, and he invited many people to write about Popper, and at the end of the book, Popper commented about those chapters. And in every case, Popper said, "You misunderstood me." This is very like that. And this happened in the case of other philosophers too. So in the case of Plato, someone may think, no, everyone is wrong, my interpretation is correct. But in those specific cases, we can say no interpretation was correct.
Yes, that is a way of getting rid of the whole thing, to throw the child with the bathwater. That is a way, but that is, yes.
There's even this history also about Hegel that he said before he died that only one person ever understood me, and that person understood me wrong. Whatever that means. Would anyone else like to make a
Just
comment?
an addition on that. There was a funny story, but it's a real story, it's a nice one, about Bernard Williams. Wrote an article, he's famous for several things, but an article was very famous. It was called Moral Luck. So he wrote this article, and then he quite unintentionally, I imagine, he started a discussion about the problem of moral luck. There were several articles for over a decade trying to approach this problem. I had the luck to had the chance to follow that discussion a few years ago. And the nice thing is, well, it was very interesting indeed, and it proved that there was a point that probably, yes, simply put, luck could have an import on whether we should be judged in a certain way, morally speaking, as badly, behaving badly or behaving correctly. And, well, after all this interesting discussion, after over a decade, Bernard Williams intervened again to say, you all got me wrong. But the project was fine anyway, so it still was a fine discussion.
Yeah. And that also comes with this whole discussion about whether we do history of philosophy here or philosophy. I mean, we always know that good philosophers are typically known for being very bad historians of philosophy in a way. But I guess one could also relate that to your concept of Adhar-Losigkeit, of unsituated, situated and unsituated. No, because I think it's in that sense where even if you misinterpret whatever that means, even if you have your own interpretation of a philosopher, you're still discussing around the question. And whenever this philosopher makes it so that you start discussing this question in a way that you can use what he said somehow to develop a discussion on this question, then it already makes you move forward in a way, I guess, and it makes it possible to engage in a discussion around this question which we share, and even if we don't reach the same conclusion, or even if I use what you said in a different way to reach a different discussion, we are still contributing to the discussion as a whole, I would say.
Yes, it is, sometimes I feel it is some sort of a performative self-contradiction. Suppose if that is a good thing that you say, you all the time if you say, you didn't get me, you didn't get me, you didn't get me, then I will ask such a man, just take a cup of tea or coffee or beer and just ask, can you tell me when would it be so far that I get you? So if you tell me, Mr. Mal, you didn't get me. So I just humbly ask you, can you give me the solution? When am I going to get you? When am I going to understand you? This is a type of performative self-contradiction. That means, and then you and I can say, that is a joke, no? You understand me only then and only then when you understand me 100% the way I understand. And this is the logic of identity which I am going to criticize in next World Congress. Logic, that means when you understand the world the way I understand, then you understand the world. My God, this is no magic. This is already. So this negative way of formulating is very safe. That is. But then all the time with the students, I always talk like this. Now tell me when I'm going to get you. So that means every understanding is partial. That's why overlap. It's always partial. It is never 100%. Not even the husband and wife and friends and two nations and all that. It is not one-to-one equality. Because then if it is one equality, Atman, Brahman, it is one, not two. And that won't do. That means try to find out the communication model in spite of the difference. And if you just want, no, you understand me only then when you understand me the way I understand myself, then I will tell the man, then make out me you. That won't do. And that's why the difference is something. If I don't like difference, then the trouble lies with me. I am a fanatic. I want that only one spectacle, only one glass, only one interpretation should be the interpretation. And I have nothing against it, I accept with all of you, there should be ultimately only one interpretation which is correct for all of us. And then my second question, and that is the trouble, whose interpretation is this interpretation? Yours or mine? And there the trouble starts. We all need heaven and earth. But now, which way? The Buddhists or the Jainists or the Muslims or this and that? So the moment we understanding is identified with one model, particular model of understanding, that won't do. That's why rationalist philosophy, rationalism is more or less dictatorial in the whole history of philosophy. from Plato till today, because rationalists, they know where the truth is. The empiricists are more tolerant. The empirical philosophers are more or less for polytheism. Rationalist philosophers are normally monotheists. And this normally happens. Hegel, leave it now. Leave it, Hegel, you know. This is, you know, the trouble is, Hegel is a great philosopher, but the trouble is, when great philosophers make mistakes, the mistakes are as great. That is the trouble.
Anyone has any other question? Well, then I have one, and it kind of touches the Hegel issue. No, but my question is, because it's kind of polemic in a way, because what I mean is, if, as you said, intercultural philosophy isn't one specific branch of philosophy, or isn't one particular philosophy, in the sense that it's not a metaphysics of any sort, it doesn't commit to any sort of metaphysics or ethical doctrine or what have you, my provoking question would be in that case, must one be an empiricist in order to be an intercultural philosopher, or is it possible to be a rationalist and still think interculturally? Because I think, for me, it might be two different questions, because you can believe that there is an a priori truth, you can believe that you can reach it, that someone can reach it, but you still can believe that you can be wrong about it, and that someone else could be right about it. You don't have to believe that you got this a priori truth right in the first place, and everything that anyone else says is necessarily wrong. You can admit, no, there must be a truth that is not empirical, that doesn't rely on experience, but maybe I'm wrong about which one that is. So I can be a rationalist and still be a fallibilist, let's say, in that sense. I can still accept other opinions. I can still try to understand other opinions. So, in that sense, well, I guess that would be the question. Is it possible even to believe in a priori truths and still have an intercultural attitude?
Yes, but anyway, the first thing, intercultural philosophy is not a branch of philosophy. You know, that is, we always don't. It's a methodology. It's Ganeri called it stance. It's a policy. It's a way of doing philosophy. So whatever you do in the spirit of intercultural philosophy. And that's why it's an attitude. And a very good word in Husserlian phenomenology, Einstellung. It is a type of way of disposition. It's a way of seeing things. So you don't formalize it, don't ontologize it. And this I got more or less from Husserl. So this is a type of...
Which is an a priori philosopher, by the way.
Now come to your a priori. So intercultural, the moment you ask me, Mr. Causality is a category, a priori category, then of course I don't understand it. Because causality means out of milk there is yogurt. But what should I say? Because it is, if I have never seen such things, how to, in what way should I approach these a priori, transcendental, ontological, ideological truth? The history has this lesson, that's why Marx and Hegel. You just tell me how to get at that causality. If it is, there is a category of causality and all empirical things, they follow that. But I don't have any access to this.
No, of course, but that wasn't exactly the question. The question is, you can still believe that there is some sort of a priori knowledge of cause.
I can't somehow believe, no.
No, I don't mean you in particular. I mean in general. Someone can believe.
In general, no, I'm not talking about in general.
Yeah.
Be careful. There is no philosopher in general.
Yes.
We are always Peter or Paul. You know, generally we believe, no. If you ask me, Mr. Mal, but you can believe there are a priori truths. I said, no. The trouble is, you ask me, why don't you believe it? Because I don't have any access to that. You just see the fire and we are here. You know.
Se eu estou entendendo um pouco a sua colocação e a maneira como ele está respondendo, e também está me ficando um pouco mais claro para mim, quer dizer, não se trata de uma perspectiva relativista, no sentido... eu estou tentando entender isso e ia fazer uma pergunta justamente, por exemplo, não sei se vai ajudar na questão. Eu venho da área da sociologia, sociology, but interested in philosophical questions. But vou falar em português se você puder colocar. Por exemplo, o capitalismo atual. Ele consegue abraçar dentro dele todos os estilos. O capitalismo ele vive de devorar toda e qualquer crítica a ele e contemporaneamente ele consegue abraçar, e você tem um mercado de nicho que vai abraçar todas as perspectivas culturais. Você poderia fazer um paralelo disso, dessa multiplicidade de perspectivas culturais que o capitalismo tem como natureza própria, abraçar, incluir em si, com as diferentes perspectivas filosóficas, por exemplo. Não sei, é um paralelo que eu estava pensando. Só que o capitalismo em si, ele é uma maneira que ele concretiza um certo way of life. Ele concretiza a point of view, a certain point of view. But a point of view que se pretende uma moldura universal. Então, pelo que eu estou entendendo dessa resposta momentânea do professor à sua pergunta, a proposta dele não é de uma moldura universal na qual vai ser respeitado todas as maneiras igualmente. Ele não acredita, pelo que eu entendi, estou querendo ver se eu estou certo nessa minha entendimento, ele não acredita que é possível esse lugar universal, né, que abraçaria todas um espaço homogeneamente, que colocasse um espaço homogêneo para todas as...
Todos tivessem o mesmo valor e a mesma...
Como se todas tivessem o mesmo valor. Eu acho que ele não relativiza nesse ponto. Pelo que, não é isso? Não sei se...
Well, I'm going to translate his question, but I'll already tell that actually it's quite different from my question, but that's okay. We can discuss this later. What he asked is, according to his understanding, because for instance, we can see the capitalism today has been an overarching structure which manages to cover, to interiorize many different cultures, many different cultural perspectives, and contain them within itself, has a sort of overarching system within which all of those cultures are contained equally. But he said he believes that you're not advocating a sort of relativism where each and every culture, each and every perspective has exactly the same value, and the intercultural perspective would be a sort of perspective that overarches all those perspectives and sees them as contained within itself. But rather it's a position that also values differently different positions, that it doesn't consider all positions to be equally valid. If that's your case.
You're right, not at all, never. Because intercultural orientation is not, it is one orientation among the democracy of orientations. But it is not one overarching. That is what intercultural philosophy doesn't amount to. Interculturality is ethically, morally, it leads to openness. This overarching capitalistic system is full of force, or it is violent in a way. And particularly this violence should be negated when I take this intercultural point of view. Point of view? Yes, point of view. No, not at all. But the trouble is, the hardware and the software. All the time people say, Japanese, for example, they are 100 times, they can copy things 100 times better than the Europeans do it at home. But still, on the hardware level, there is a type of transmission. But the software of this culture is still very, very different. And Husserl, for example, was very short-sighted when he talked about universalization of European humanity. That means he really meant the only reason which universally would be valid, that is Europeanism. And that was short-sighted. So the world, somewhere I have written, westernization of the modern world is not Europeanization of the modern world. The world has westernized, but the world is not European. A fanatic like, say, Khomeini, he used telephone and all these things, Western things, but the software which he sent was completely different. So we should not confuse hardware similarities with the software. And sometimes even within the same culture, on the hardware level, things are completely the same. And the software, the things are very, very different. And that is where this intercultural attitude helps me personally. That we normally, the world is Western, the world is European. No, the world has westernized itself, whether the world likes it or not. I told him, this country is super modern. Day before yesterday, I feel so much as if I'm in Calcutta, It is something like Calcutta, Bombay or Delhi. But anyway, so I was there and all of a sudden saw these cocos, In Calcutta as a student, everywhere you just get it and drink it. And then I said, let us drink it. You just imagine the man there, he accepted Visa card. You just imagine. That is in Germany you can't find such things. So in a way, this westernization is nearly going everywhere. But one should not confuse. The world is not getting European from within. And the software, things are very, very different. And not only in the world, but even within European countries. Take the software in the European Common Market. How the software are differentiating themselves. The Greeks and the Turks and the this and that.
But the hardware, it's possible to change the hardware?
Hardware?
Is it possible to change the hardware?
Difficult, but of course it could be, but difficult. Then of course the software, the ethical part of it, that means our spiritual side of it, the ethical, moral part should be quite powerful. But that has never been the case there, you are right. But it is not impossible. But then we should have politicians like, say, Mahatma Gandhi or Mandela and so many such things. But that's difficult. That is true. So that's why I told you, I'm not a pessimist. No? I will just fight like this, in spite of the fact that ultimately the world is there where it was.
I'm sorry, Professor, but we have to finish already for today because there's going to be another section very soon here. But
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank everyone for coming today. We will continue tomorrow at the same hour, at the same time, and we'll also have some sections in the morning on other tables of communications, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Yes, thank you. Then I want to thank you all that I could be so frank in telling my views. That is all. And if whether you accept it or not, only leave it like this. So that is, if you like caviar, just go on. I don't like caviar, I like my spinach. So leave me spinach with me. That is all. And so long as there is spinach and caviar, we shouldn't fight. But if there is only caviar or spinach, of course then I have to eat spinach or caviar. That's the example for one of my seminars. I told this. That is your Kant and my Jung. Leave it.
Ô, professor,
Você leva a mim?